everything. Oh, and guess what? So I found this article, right? I found a news clip, better yet, and it was talking about a military training that was conducted in a residential area in Pasadena, California, right? This military training had flashbangs, simulated gunfires, and do you know what time of day it was happening? You know, you would think maybe, I don't know, afternoon or something like that. Oh no, 1 a.m. in the morning on a weekday when people have things to do. Did I also mention it's in a residential area that was populated? Not a ghost town. Oh no. In a residential area where people are probably trying to sleep or keep their kids, in bed, or dealing with their elderly, family. Maybe people are dealing with any and all kinds of things. Maybe people are dealing with sensory sensitivity. Maybe they're a veteran and they're dealing with PTSD, or someone else with PTSD. Maybe they have a pet and you're doing, I don't know, simulated gunfire at 1 o'clock in the morning. Another report I read said that it was still going on at 2 o'clock, even though the first report I read, which is available to you in shorts, said that they were supposed to be going on for another 30 minutes, but apparently it was longer than that. So I have community based questions. And I said, you know what? Let me go ahead. Me being me, y'all know how I am. I'm all up in their business. I'm all up in the tea. I said, let me go ahead and just pull some of my community questions. So before I even get to that, let me pull up some of these details. So the recent report described an overnight military training, which they described in one article as like urban warfare. And I'm like, what's all that about? Right. I'm not going to say inherently to be in opposition of like military training, because of course there should be military training. I guess I'm curious about this urban warfare. I'm curious about the time framing for which people were notified about this particular training. I'm curious as to why it needed to occur in that community. Why did it need to occur at that time? Like, were there no other alternate opportunities for holding and conducting this type of military training? These are things that I wanted to ask. So I went ahead and took some notes. I'm gonna go ahead and give y'all my notes. And then if y'all want, y'all can go peruse back into my shorts to go see the actual live clip. Cause you know how I am. I'm gonna get to these receipts. So I'm gonna give you the receipts. The receipt is sitting in shorts. It's 1 minute long from the actual recording, right? I didn't want to give you too much. But I thought it was super important that we talk about some of these community questions, right? Why would they have an overnight military training exercise at the former St. what's it called, Luke's Hospital property in Pasadena, California? Why did they have it there, right? That's one of my questions. The exercise reportedly involved a helicopter, which you can see. Once again, I want to verify resources. Child, you can see in the video. That helicopter, it comes down like this in the video. Once again, this is a 1 minute video. You see flashbang devices. You actually physically can see that. That's why I wanted to make sure you saw that clip. Simulated gunfire, child is in there. And this occurred in a residential environment, right? The local people were reporting concerns. So that was my main question, right? My main question was about the community, because how much notice did you actually give individuals that this was going to be happening? I am somebody who has worked in the community to advocate for accessibility resources, specifically focusing on sensory sensitivity. And I was very curious, if you're going to do a program, better yet, if you're going to simulate something of that magnitude, a military training, operation, what have you, and you're going to do it in the community, why would you do it at 1 o'clock in the morning? They have, there are such things as ghost towns, right? There are places where it's residential, but people aren't actually actively living there, right? We literally, if this is military operations, it just kind of seemed interesting that it didn't behoove them to consider maybe that there were vets there that might be triggered by the simulation of gunfire, because the sound was quite alarming when I heard it. I don't know the distance the videographer was when they were recording that. Um, Once again, that clip is available in my shorts, but it was quite loud. It was very intrusive, right? And once again, I'm curious about what kind of notifications the community was given to prepare for that. Like, what at what decibel was the sound? Because normally in communities they have like sound restrictions about what time of day someone can have certain kinds of sounds, right? Especially when it's later in the day or something, let's say as obtuse as 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. Most people probably work that first shift. That's the assumption a lot of people have, is that most people are working first shift. So you're interrupting people's sleep when you have things like that occurring. So once again, I'm curious about the community impact. I'm curious if they went after the fact to figure out how to engage in harm reduction. You know, we talk a lot about how do the civilians, how does the client, how does the consumer absorb the harm? Because when you're doing simulated activities like this, are you going to go back into the community and make sure you didn't cause that community harm when you did whatever you did in that community? Did you offer them noise cancelators? Anything to help them be okay when you did this simulation, right? So I wrote some actual questions down. Let me see if my computer will let me pull this up for y'all, because when I tell you the questions that I had that we're going to try to answer, right? Why? Why did they even pick that location? Because that was something that made me have pause. Why did you pick this Saint um why'd you pick this hospital, this former hospital? Why'd you pick this location? Was there not any other alternate locations that you could have had? Especially when you think about the time of day. When you think about the surrounding community, they describe the surrounding community as a relatively quiet community. So why would you introduce this type of stimulus to that community? That's why initially I asked the question, is this some type of desensitization that's happening? Is this conditioning? I'm not going to say that military doesn't do some types of activities in the community, right? Not my place to say. But why was that necessary? I want to know, what is your rationale for that kind of activity? Like, I'm waiting to see what news articles, and I'm gonna follow this. So you don't worry, you guys. We'll keep abreast of what's happening. I want to know why you did it to start with. What was the rationale? And urban warfare is just a very interesting term to use when you're describing these kind of things. And 2 o'clock in the morning. 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay. I'm just curious. Like, what about that hospital or previous hospital structure did they feel like operationally they found valuable enough to make them feel like they had to do it right then and there? Okay, so now that we talked about that, because that was just something that really's been bothering me as I've been looking at this and over the last couple hours, I had a couple more questions about the community impact. Let me see, because I wrote a whole bunch of stuff down. Y'all know me, I'm always writing some stuff down. I really want to know how much notice they got, because the way that it was written, it seems like they were very much bothered by what was going on. Reasonably so. Like, if you're trying to sleep, it's 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. You're like, what is going on? Even if they give you a notice, like, did the notice, was it a full disclosure notice where they knew exactly what was happening? You literally see a helicopter come down into the hospital area, and you can see the strikes. You can see the lighting, right? Before you can hear, you can sight, you can see. Well, actually, more so you hear and then you see. Had to do quick physics back in my head, like, wait, wait, wait. But like, were renter homeowners, businesses, neighbor, like, how were they actually notified? Because sometimes people say they notified you, but really they just mean they sent it out. And if you saw it, you saw it. And if you didn't, you didn't. So that's what I'm curious about. And once again, most importantly, I just always think about the mental health and health outcomes in general, because what consideration did you really give for the young, for those who are challenged in any kind of way? Like, the fact that that could be a sensory overload if you have health issues. um what kind of consideration did they put in advance to make sure that people could be stabilized as those things were occurring? That is very alarming when you hear rapid gunshots. I don't care what your background or orientation may be or your previous experience or exposure, that is very alarming. To have rapid gunfires and to hear helicopter, people act like that's not something you would you would process. Oh my goodness, there's a helicopter coming. There are sounds. There's rapid gunfire. That would be very alarming. So I'm very curious as to what what type of notification did you give the community? What kind of respect and like accommodation and support did you offer them when you conducted such a training? And now that you have done said training, what are you going to offer to stabilize them? Because we can see that they were visibly impacted where they reported concerns that a council person had to come out there and record so people can see what was happening. I think we need more information about this because that's very concerning. What about our veterans? In particular, I always think about them, but especially during times like this. Did you think about them and what kind of experience, like how triggering and traumatic that could be for them just to hear rapid gunshots and fires? Did you think about their psyche or anyone who has PTSD or any type of gun related history or exposure, how that could traumatize them? And you just in a residential area, people generally assume that they're safe when they're at home, or at least they hope and pray that they can. People literally embed things into their home so they can feel safe. And you have potentially made someone's home feel unsafe to them. My question is, was it even necessary? What necessitated them needing to do it at that facility? What is so uniquely um relevant about that facility that required them to do that in a residential, required them to do it while people were at home reasonably at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning? Why? I look forward to their rationale. I will be looking forward, as I told you guys. But also I'm just thinking about the children, the babies. You rattling and startling people, pets. You know how if you have a pet, if anyone's ever had like a pet, especially like dogs and stuff, like they pop off because that their ability to hear and sense and feel things is heightened more so than we experience. So for them, it's even more elevated. Did you consider any of that? You're disrupting the ecosystem and structural setup of that community that they already had established. The article that I better yet, the video that I put up earlier, they described the community as relatively quiet. So that's not what they typically entertain. It's not a boisterous, loud community. So why'd you do it? Child, questions that need answers. Since I'm newer to going live on this mobile device, it seems like I'm getting some more engagement. Thank you for all your lovely comments. I'm not from New York, but I got a few friends that are out in Brooklyn. So thank you. I'm actually from Michigan. And you said you like my lipstick. Thank you. I appreciate it. As far as my favorite dessert, I love everything with sweet potatoes. I'm a potatoes kind of person. I just love sweet potatoes. So once again, thank you all for popping on this live. We gonna be sending these receipts. Y'all know how I feel about these news articles. When certain things come out, we have to dive in and look in. I like to use my legally everywhere framework. I like to see like the different points that we discuss that goes on the legally everywhere framework. But today I just wanted to focus in on the overall impact to the individual, like harm. How do we absorb the harm? Because as a civilian, why would you think something like that's going to be happening in your neighborhood? A military training? Do they do military trainings in residential areas? Yeah, sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. But something of that caliber, did that need to happen in a civilian space? It doesn't sound appropriate. Because once again, as I said at the beginning of this live, they have ghost towns where people don't physically live, but the residential area um is still there, right? So they could still stimulate certain kinds of things. Why did that need to occur in a residential area that was actually actively populated at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning? That's my question. I'm gonna continue to look into it. I thank you all who have popped on my live. I see someone asked, what did you just scroll on to? You just scrolled on to someone who observed some news clips and wanted to talk about it live with you all, because once again, we want to get into these receipts. We want to know what's going on so we can be civically engaged, and we can kind of, once again, ask questions about the things that are happening in the world around us. Does it make sense to be happening? And if it doesn't, we need to ask the questions to the correct kinds of people. But once we first need to sit and understand what is happening, why is it happening? Is there justification and jurisdiction for it to actually occur? And if not, we need to investigate that. And if so, and we find it problematic, we need to investigate that as well. Once again, this is Adrian from Legally Everywhere. Um, and I'll see you all in the next video. It was a pleasure talking to you all this afternoon. See you next time.